Hello, and welcome to our 5th episode of Positive Peeps, all about giving and creating and how that leads to healing of thyself. I am beyond excited for our next guest. I met her very recently. She was my ASL coach on an episode of The Blacklist where I had to learn some sign language. And I think we've become friends in the process, and I knew after my second Zoom with her that I hoped and wanted her to be a guest on Positive Peeps. Her name is Alexandria Wailes, and she is an actor, director, dancer, choreographer, art museum educator, DASL, that's a director of artistic sign language for television and film. She is the epitome of the word artist, multi-hyphenate artist, and I've seen her work in various mediums, and she is extraordinary. And beyond all that, I just find her to be one of the most positive peeps I've ever met. So without further ado, I'm so excited. I would like to invite Alexandria Wailes. Hello, Alexandria. I am happy that you are here. You're happy to be here too. Thank you. Now, we're going to invite your interpreter, Stephanie, exactly. Because I asked Alex, this is for everyone to know, who she's comfortable with that is familiar with her voice. Because interpreting is very important in ASL, almost like, in my opinion, translating poetry. There's choices to be made.
Well, sorry to put Stephanie on the spot. I'm talking about you now and why I picked her for this meeting. Stephanie and I first met in 2003. Late spring of 2003. And this was a show from Deaf West, Big River, that had transferred to Broadway. And I had been in the LA production, came to New York, and Stephanie was one of our rehearsal interpreters. And I felt a connection with her. So over a time, we learn who can express our voice, because interpreters need to know the individual nature of communication. So with Stephanie's background knowledge and openness and awareness of who I am, it felt like she could capture what I'm saying when I'm in full ASL mode.
So it seems to me that you welcome her, not just for long-term understanding of each other, not just for her skill set, but also for the vibe and the connection you have, just like a collaborator between two people, artistic and otherwise. So I just mentioned a little bit in the intro for those who maybe didn't know or didn't hear that I met Alex through the Blacklist, but I just thought it was smart on the Blacklist's part to hire someone who is deaf and who has worked in the interpreting world, so that you taught me and we did not have an ASL interpreter. So we were literally speaking 2 languages. I think it's important for people to know that may not be familiar with ASL, that it's not a direct verbatim translation of English to sign.
And that's also a part of the fun and the challenge, because you had another actor on the set, Bob, that you are connecting with, right? Engaging with and finding that happy medium.
With Bob, I realized that on set, the word action can't be heard by a deaf actor, or a deaf artist. So they don't know when we begin. It's a small disadvantage about that moment. So they have to stay ready and wait for a cue. And knowing the scene that we stop and start and go back, I wanted to learn, and I was excited to learn, from the top, or that paragraph before. All the little things that you did with me and your patience, I was able to actually use as a collaborator with Bob to keep things, or we're going from your line, or from when he speaks, and so forth. And I want to dive into you. I know you had your first dance class when you were 3. That being said, I do want to acknowledge that you got meningitis when you were 1 year old and lost your hearing then. So you've lived without your hearing since you were 1 year old. And how you got into dance and how that evolved into a life as an artist, and a little bit about your upbringing and family. So I guess if you wouldn't mind starting from there, how you got into dance, how your parents got you into dance, and how it grew from there.
Okay, so I'll try and condense it for you. Yes, I did have meningitis just after my first birthday. And really, I mean, it's horrible for any parent to realize that their baby is that close to death. And I should not be alive, but because of medication, I survived. And the medication, the overdose of the medication caused my deafness. But hey, if I had to choose, I'd choose life, right? So I'm okay with being deaf, totally okay. It's all good. So I actually do want to bring it back. I know that my being deaf saves me in so many levels. I'm from a blended family, brilliant, beautiful people. I grew up in Delaware, half Black, half white, and I was the only deaf person in my entire family. I attended a school that was a school for the deaf, and I was also in mainstream that was part deaf and part hearing classes. But I was always the only mixed race kid. So that was already something. But then on top of it being deaf, with everyone else being hearing, and I needed to find ways of communicating. And growing up, it was very isolating. I've talked with my mother, where she said, "Thank you for allowing me to give birth to you," in effect, for me choosing her. And I think that we decided to live, right? So I do look back at my presence, and I think it gave a lot of lessons or ways of viewing life. And then in particular, my deafness. As a kid with a white mother, my mom was already, she was hip, she was cool, she's a liberal thinker, she was eager and enthusiastic, curious about the world. And I think that was imbued in me as well. But being deaf put me on a different path in terms of the system of education for the deaf and people that you would encounter. And my mom found a lot of her inner strength in arguing with the educational system, who thought that it might be best to hold me back a year. And my mom was like, absolutely not. She's moving on.
So to have that advocate at such a young age for your education, for inclusion. Also, I know from my research, we haven't mentioned it, your parents learned sign language, ASL, when you were 3.
My parents did learn to sign with me. And that is something that I will be eternally grateful to them for. Because that desire, that acceptance, that love for their child, and a child to have that communication with their parents saved me too. I feel that I was already as a child different, but I knew where my haven was. I could communicate with my parents. So dance became an outlet. Dance became a way of finding a means of expression at a deeper level. So I think it saved me.
Right from the get-go at 3 years old. I mean, this is what the whole conversation is about, how creating a creative experience, giving or creative experience can heal. And dance, an artistic expression, you just used the word saved you. 2 questions. 1, do you have any memory of hearing from your first year of life? And two, as you were in dance from 3 years old to now, can you talk a little bit about the experience of not hearing music? I know there's bass and rhythm, but some songs don't necessarily have bass, some songs for dance. How do you translate? You have a song in your head based on the story, based on the intention. I mean, at a young age, I mean, that's a sophisticated concept. Where does the music come from that informs dance for most of the hearing? How does that translate for you?
Well, I don't know if you believe in a higher power or the power of the universe or whatever, that there's something that can be imbued in us, but the interpreter missed that word. But there's the musicality. The musicality. It's not defined by our ears. It's defined by our core, our self. And it was something that was given to me. And yes, as I was growing up, I would observe what was going on or try to feel if there was sound coming on the radio. And I did learn to watch music videos when I was growing up. And there was MTV, and I was watching and learning what kind of rhythm from them. And I would read the captions, and I was just getting information in every way. And then I would just trust
Wow.
how the movement would happen in space. And yes, there's music, but you either have it or you don't have it. You can't necessarily teach that. And when we look at it at a deeper level, it's that essence, that soul, that core that finds a way. It's going to find its way through. And so I do have a funny story about college. I went to the University of Arts in Philadelphia. So we were taking ballet as well in the curriculum. And I'm not a morning person, but I just had to do it. There was ballet every morning. So one morning, our teacher was the sweetest, little tiny man from Russia with a very strong accent.
How do you know he?
Well, I could tell, I could read his lips, right? So you could, and the interpreter would also tell me that this was a strong action, but you can tell if someone's from the UK or from France through lip reading, just the way that the words are produced differently. So this teacher was I was crossing the floor, and the teacher stopped the class for a second. And this one thing about college is that 60% of my classes, they had live pianist accompanying the class or a percussionist, right? Live drums, live piano. And that was very much to my advantage. So he stopped the class and he asked me to come forward, and I'm thinking, now what did I do? Oh, shit. But I went to the front and he asked me to do it again. So I did it. And then he said, okay, everyone, remember, she's deaf, but the rhythm, she's completely nailed. So you're listening differently. And I think that it was definitely a moment of a recognition that you don't have to be hearing to have rhythm or musicality. It's how you absorb information in your surroundings.
It seems that for my sort of interpretation of what I'm taking in, it's not just that your other senses were heightened, but a whole channel was opened up. But I have just found, growing up and working in the theater and working in television, you can't really teach rhythm and comedic rhythm. And it's the same with dance. You know, there's certain people that are imbued with natural talents. The same with athletes, musicians. There is a part of the brain that gets formed if someone's taught the piano, and it's also with languages at a young age. An actual part of the brain forms that creates, like, there's another, like, little, they look like fingers. Another one forms when you work at, that's why kids are able to learn languages easier at a younger age, because their brains are more malleable. You literally either were born with a channel, a gift, but also the experience of being deaf. It sounds like developed not just that open channel and the other senses, but a part of your brain that can somehow know how to have rhythm without necessarily hearing the rhythm that we hear. It's actually kind of extraordinary. It is magical. It does sound like something higher. And it just also lets everybody know there really is no limitations.
I also am a certified yoga teacher, and we arranged to have an interpreter for the training. It's 200 hours. And I would participate in the Om, and I didn't know how loud my voice was. However, I could feel the Om vibrations carrying throughout the space. I could feel it.
Very powerful.
Yeah, absolutely powerful.
So people should know that you've been in multiple Broadway shows, you've choreographed Broadway shows. Let's just jump to that. On Children of a Lesser God on Broadway, could you speak to that a little bit and how you got that job?
So the Dazzle, a previous title has been an ASL consultant or an ASL coach or sign master. So a group who do this kind of work, I'd say there's about 8 or 9 years ago in DC, they decided to use the term director of artistic sign language as opposed to director of American Sign Language, because artistic is the key distinguishing point. Because American Sign Language is not just the academic signs or that are being used, but it depends on the story. It depends on, like an August Wilson play, say, then you would absolutely want a Dazzle who knows Black ASL.
Mm.
Because if you had a white Dazzle, they would not necessarily be teaching that inner community knowledge. So, and we're calling it artistic sign language because we're also trying to look at the director's vision. We're trying to look at the period of the piece, whether if it's occurring in the 70s. People were signing differently back then.
Wow.
Today. For example, you mentioned Children of a Lesser God. The story is a love story between a deaf woman and a hearing man. I know that each Dazzle has his and her own approach and her own perspective. And there are some who are more adept at providing this work for Shakespeare, and others for musicals, and others for period pieces.
Shakespeare.
And I'm very fortunate that I've had the experience of working in all of those.
Shakespeare. That's hard enough. What is,
yes.
Oh my goodness.
So and there's something brilliant about ASL when it's done right. When it's done right, Shakespeare and ASL can just dance together, be on a par. And it makes it, I think it actually makes Shakespeare better because of the ASL. And I think it's actually closer to what the bard was intending, right? The musicality, the total presence of his language.
The rhythm to it. There's like a rule structure almost. There's a couple things I'm very excited to talk about as well. Can we jump from Dazzle to something else? All right. And when I read or heard about Mother Courage, so for those who don't know, Mother Courage, the Public Theater in Central Park with Kevin Kline and Meryl Streep, you got cast. They decided for the mute character, they decided to look at deaf actresses, and they brought in deaf actresses from all over the country. Smartly, they cast you. And but the character was mute, but the character could hear. And as a deaf person, you wondered, how am I going to know my cues, where I am, what's going on in the play? And so I heard that you memorized the entire play.
I did. Yeah, it's a little crazy. A little crazy. I think I just took it on myself a little to memorize the entire show. at least for the scenes that I was in, because I was relying on my eyes so much for information that I couldn't be seen staring at the actors. I was supposed to be doing my thing as my character, Katrine. And I also, at the same time, was learning the rhythms, the movements of the other actors. So I knew what was going on in the story while I was doing my actions. And that's, I think, was the first time that I felt actually seen as an actor. And I think it helps that I had Meryl's stamp of approval, right? Probably. And I have so many great things to say about her. I know that there was mutual respect. There was a moment in that production. You know Brecht, his style,
Presentation.
breaking the fourth wall.
That presentation often at times, yeah, fourth wall break.
Yes. Yes. And for every single scene, they would have like a caption, a synopsis of what was to come in that scene that was being played. I, as the actor, had to go on stage and announce to everyone what was to come. So that was kind of the announcement that they would give to the audience before every scene. They'd pick a different actor, and an individual character would come out and just give their blurb. So I came forward, and the creative team was in discussion that maybe we could have the stage manager do it from the God mic or say the lines, and I felt no. So I approached Meryl, and I said, I had an idea, and let me know what you think. When I came out to do it in sign, that she came with me and spoke that caption. And she did it, and she said, everyone, this is the kids' idea. She was in the room with George, said, I want you in this. This is what I want to do, that Alexandria comes out and signs it, and I will speak it. Because this is the scene that impacts the two of us. And I was like, awesome.
This is awesome.
And it was for me a very important moment, because as an artist who is deaf, who signs, that's my truth. And I wanted people to have that aha experience. So this is the artist. And she just did a 2-hour and 45-minute performance. And we didn't know she was deaf. Yeah. Yes.
The thing that I take the most from that, not that you also surprised and informed the audience like, ta-da, you know, like, which is like, it makes them realize, oh, wow, you can incorporate deaf artists, deaf actors, and not even realize it. But really, the thing that struck me that you said is that is your authentic expression, that you remained authentic to yourself. And authenticity is the thing that is required, in my opinion, to be a connective artist or successful artist, if you will, whatever success means. I don't necessarily mean successful in career or financial, but a connected artist. And a lot of young actors, they go into rooms and people want to see their authentic selves come through.
Yes, yes.
So for anyone hearing that, you have to find your truth. And also, you went to Mother Courage and asked what she thought. And so also, a young artist, I want to encourage that if you have an idea that maybe no one else thinks about, but you come up with in your interpretation and in your POV and in your experience, you never know unless you try. So that's what I wanted to hear about that. I also wanted to know a little bit about what you do at the Whitney Museum.
So with the Whitney Museum, I am a part of a small cohort of deaf educators who provide tours in ASL. The Whitney used to want me to basically just read and learn about the art and learn about the works themselves and then just do a straight lecture. And now it's a little more interactive. So many people from the deaf community have been denied the opportunity to critique art, to explore color choices and the artistic work, and to see the world through different lenses, through different perspectives. And also, I do want to add, I did just found a new organization, BHO5.org. I wanted to create a space where deaf talent, whether in front of or behind the camera or on stage or working as part of the creative team, where the deaf talent feels that they can come with confidence and do well and focus on their job instead of having to do all that side educating that they're and begging for, say, an interpreter and feeling like they're stepping on toes and all of that. So bho5.org is what I'm working with.
Really, I'm sort of the last thing I'm most curious about is how some of the things that may have been obstacles to you related to the deaf or not, really just human obstacles. It may be heartbreak, job, disaster, family, death, whatever happens to. How has art, whether it be teaching at the museum or choreography or directing an episode of Messenger or doing some Dazzle, how has that helped you? And how have, in those times, separate from that, from art, how do you remain positive?
Well, I think art, it reminds me of the importance of empathy, of having compassion. I mean, luckily in my life, frequently art has been something amazing going on at the same time something hard has gone on. So art is healing, and it's a way of reorienting and choosing the language that you want to communicate in, whether it's signing or speaking or dance movement. It's hard to explain, but I do know that if not for art, I don't know who or what I would be or be doing.
Same. Same. Where do you think you found the gift that I wish everybody had, but unfortunately not everyone has, of empathy?
I think there's two parts of it. Definitely from my family. And maybe it is also that my family has a great deal of women. So that's just a natural part of it. But also because of my mixed race heritage and being deaf and working in a hearing world as well as in a deaf world. But I've learned is gratitude, gratitude of being alive, gratitude of knowing that my experiences are valid and knowing other people will be able to connect and share and acknowledge. And I do want to again, I just want to say I strongly believe about my deafness was a gift. And people can fight me on that, that's fine, but it was a gift. I can't imagine being a hearing person. Life is so much more interesting when we realize that it's not all about us. It's not just about me. And that, yes, you're an important part, but you're an important part of what everybody's journey is. So you have to go through and find your voice. And it's okay if it happens right away. I think I'm still discovering what my voice is. I'm not done yet. I'm still on the road.
I'll just say ditto and yes and agree to everything you just said. It's perfect. I'm so happy you were here with me today. I love getting to know you. And thank you for your time and your work.
Anytime, Amir. And how cool that things worked out. That we just met, Amir. We just met a month ago. That's like, what? And I feel that we've known each other for a long time. And that's what surprises me. When you're open to it, right? Like, I know you, you know me. There's a level of connection. And maybe it is because, not just because we're artists, maybe it's because of the way we view the world. Maybe it's that we're trying to consciously seek out positivity out of necessity, survival.
You're gonna make me
Yeah, it's all good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stephanie.
Pleasure.
I just want to also say to Stephanie, I am so glad Alex recommended you. In the little bit I've known Alex, this really felt
She's
quite
the best.
and special and sensitive. And I am also very, very happy to have met you.
Thank you.
All right, cool. So we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you.